Sarada is one of the most interesting characters to discuss when it comes to the topic of power scaling. Because how do you get Sarada on the level of someone using the power of one of the strongest characters in the entire franchise? It seems impossible, or at least it seemed impossible. You see, this discourse has somewhat shifted from can she get to this level to now being that it doesn't make sense that she's on this level. And to be totally honest, I get where you guys are coming from, but at the same time, I think there's more to this conversation than what's being discussed. You see, this all stems from Sarada being able to dodge an attack from Hiiyuri at point blank range. And this wasn't any ordinary attack, this was the Chidori, which is stated to amp the movement speed of its user. So not only is this guy a clone of Sasuke, he's also part 10 tails, possesses Code's chakra, has 2 renegons, and likely possesses the power of whichever Otsutsuki Code got his claw marks from. So this guy is pretty busted on paper. So Sarada being able to dodge him is absolutely insane. Now, with that said, let's try to contextualize this with what we know so far. So Hiiyuri is a clone of Sasuke, and as stated by Jura in chapter 10, the ones who get devoured are turned into trees, then used as nourishment. So this simply means that Sasuke's chakra is now being used as nourishment for either all of the Shinjus or just the one that looks like him, that being Hiiyuri. Now we have no idea which is true, but even if we assume that it all goes to the Sasuke Shinju, that doesn't necessarily equate to the Sasuke Shinju being equal to Sasuke himself. That's because the entity isn't necessarily using Sasuke's actual body, where most of his strength naturally lies, since Sasuke's innate strength isn't entirely the chakra that the Shinju is able to absorb and then use as nourishment. Also, side note, the white Zetsus from Naruto that were created by the original 10 tails also possess the ability to mimic the look of someone by absorbing their chakra, and also had the ability to mimic their chakra signature. So this ability that is being used by the Shinju isn't necessarily new, even though the Shinjus themselves doesn't seem to be a perfect copy of the person that they're trying to imitate. So it seems that they're not quite good at the ability as yet. By the way, I'm not saying that Hiiyuri isn't stronger than Sasuke. But there's a big difference between Hiiyuri being Sasuke level by virtue of just using some of his chakra as nourishment plus his other amps, as opposed to not being Sasuke level, but those amps then get him to Sasuke level and above Sasuke level. With that said, this then brings us to Boruto versus Hiiyuri, since this is where the main contention lies when it comes to the Sarada scaling. That's because I thought we were mostly in agreement that Hiiyuri was relative to Boruto in power, since he was able to cancel Boruto's Rasengan. This can only happen when 2 opposing forces of a similar power level clash, which results in one negating the other. Yet this relatively standard form of scaling is now being contested since Sarada also showed relativity. This would mean that by virtue of being relative to Hiiyuri, Sarada would also be relative to Boruto, which doesn't make sense for self. Now, this does get a bit tricky if you factor in Sarada's reaction to being cornered by Code, as opposed to Boruto's. Even though she held her composure for the most part, it was pretty clear that she was panicking a bit, as shown by the sweat marks being drawn on multiple panels. Now you guys can try to argue against this by saying that it was just a sunny day outside and it was very hot, or that she was just surprised, but that would just be a disingenuous argument. It was pretty clear what the author is trying to convey by Sarada having sweat marks on multiple panels, then having Boruto come in at the last moment to save her. It implies that Sarada wouldn't have been able to defeat Code, which is a threat stated to be greatly above Jigen, so this isn't like any knock against Sarada. Yet when it comes to Boruto, he was confident that he had the power to defeat Code, which later translated into feats. Now we first saw this when Code tried a surprise attack from behind using the power of his claw marks, but Boruto was able to easily perceive his movements and dodge his attack. Not only that, Boruto was able to react to Code a second time using his sword, when Code tried to attack him with his other hand. One thing to point out is that this is not only a speed feat but also a showing of physical strength, since Boruto was able to hold off Code's attack with one hand. Now we should also note that Boruto wasn't using his Karma Seal and neither was Code at that time. That later changed after the effects of Rasengan Uzuhiko started to spread across Code's body, which caused him to panic. Though even after activating his Karma Seal, Code wasn't able to land a single hit on base Boruto. He tried multiple times but he just kept moving away from Boruto. Now this part is more so an ability based on the effects of Rasengan Uzuhiko, or some people believe that Boruto is just spamming Flying Thunder God, which I guess is possible. But I personally believe that the early effects of Rasengan Uzuhiko was responsible for this, which was recently confirmed on the Boruto official website, so you guys can go check that out. Now, what we can link to Boruto's pure physical prowess is when he landed his Rasengan on Code. That's because even though Boruto teleported behind him, likely using Flying Thunder God, Code simply wasn't able to react to him, similar to how Sage Madara was able to react to Tobirama when he tried to attack him from behind using Flying Raijin. What this proved is that even though Flying Thunder God provides you with instant teleportation, which is instantaneous movement, someone can still react to your activation or spawn speed if they're fast enough. And not only did Boruto stand behind Code before attacking him, Code saw him, yet he was still unable to block or dodge. This simply means or implies that Boruto in base form is faster than Unlimited Code using his Karma Seal. Now this doesn't mean that Boruto is physically stronger than Code, since as I pointed out in my video about Daemon, being faster doesn't necessarily equate to you being stronger. In fact, you can even argue that Boruto isn't faster than Code when he's using the Karma Seal. He just wasn't able to dodge due to the effects of Rasengan Uzuhiko, which Boruto said was halfway applied to his body already. So I say all of this to say that we have no idea where base Boruto actually scales in comparison to Karma Code until we get a fight between the two of them without Code being under the effects of Uzuhiko. Then again, you could argue that Boruto created the ability so he could contend with beings he isn't necessarily on par with physically, but that's just headcanon. What we do know is that Ada said that the Shinjus were out of Code's league and described them as monsters. So this implies that the Shinjus scale above Code. But at the same time, I wouldn't extrapolate too much from this since Ada has no way of actually knowing this since Code didn't fight them. And by the way, Code losing to Boruto, who then struggled with the Shinjus, doesn't necessarily imply that either since he was under the effects of Uzuhiko prior to activating the Karma Seal. It could also be that Ada was just referring to the nature of the entities since she clarified the statement by calling them monsters. So it's like saying they're bigger monsters than Code, not that they're stronger than Code, which would make sense. With that said, here's what I believe. I believe that none of these characters are Shiki or Baron mode Naruto level. Karma Code is above Jigen, greatly above Jigen. But he's below Daemon, who's also above Jigen, but below Ishiki unless stated or proven otherwise. Boruto in base is possibly relative to a Karma Code, which puts him above Jigen, while also still being below Shiki. Now Sarada is likely Jigen level or slightly above, which puts her below Karma Code and base Boruto. Now the reason why I've come to this conclusion for Sarada is because she was of course not confident in her ability to beat Code, but also because Hidari was able to tank her Chidori without actually being critically injured. That just means that while she might be fast enough to dodge him, she isn't strong enough to critically wound him. This means that there's a gap in power level between Hidari and Sarada, enough to cause doubt on whether she's as strong as Hidari. Now another thing we need to consider is the dynamics of the fight itself. What I mean by this is that there's a reason why the Chidori is used in conjunction with the Sharingan. That's because the ability amps your speed beyond what your eyes can normally perceive. So it pretty much leaves you open to counterattacks. That's why Minato told Kakashi to never use it again. And it was only resurrected after Obito gave him his Sharingan. This allowed Kakashi to perceive his environments while he was moving at such speeds, thus no longer being vulnerable to counterattacks. Now Hidari, who is basically a baby at this point, clearly isn't aware of this fact, so he basically charged in and didn't anticipate Sarada being able to take advantage of that disadvantage, whilst also incorporating her own Sharingan to aid in dodging his attack. By the way, the answer is no. The Rinnegan doesn't have the same perception prowess of the Sharingan, which is why Sasuke still used his Sharingan to locate a shrunken Jigen, and also anytime he used the Chidori. With that said, there's obviously a limit to who can take advantage of this loophole. It's not like little Timmy down the street is gonna drop Kikishiki or Tsutsuki if he charges him with a Chidori without the aid of a Byakugan or a Sharingan, right? That's not going to work. So the power level of the person does matter, which means that Sarada was strong enough to take advantage of it. But the main point is that it doesn't then mean that Sarada is as strong as Hidari, especially since her own Chidori wasn't able to significantly damage him, unless you think Sarada was holding back for some reason. Speaking of holding back, I did get some comments saying that it's possible that Hidari was holding back here, which I did find interesting, mainly because when people hear the term holding back, they start trying to morally rationalize why a character would do such a thing, and I'm guilty of that as well. Now what I mean by this is that someone holding back doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying not to kill the person. It could also mean that they believe the amount of power they're currently using is enough to handle the current threat. So when it does get to the point where they need to tap into more of their power, they would proceed to do so, thus outputting more power or going all out. So it is possible that Hiiyuri just wasn't going all out, and all of them might need to work together to take him out when he actually does, which does seem to be the case based on Konohamaru's presence. That's why I said in my chapter review that we should take everything with a grain of salt. Nothing is confirmed as yet, especially when you add context. So just enjoy reading the manga, say that Sarada is relative to base Boruto or not if you really want to. Then when you get more information, you update your belief accordingly and move on with life. It's not that serious. After all, this is indeed a monthly manga, so all we can do is just argue our beliefs until the next chapter arrives to debunk our claims or affirm them, you know? That's all it is. With that said, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think like Sarada is base Boruto level, you know? And also, I did find that interesting because we haven't seen Sarada use the Mangekyo, and I have a video coming out on that as well because I do find that very interesting. But in regards to the power level, because of course, if we have Sarada with 3 Tomoes reacting to Hidari, what can MS Sarada actually accomplish, you know, because that's also a power up. So we'll see how that plays out, I guess. But of course, you guys can join the Discord and we'll just have conversations as we do every day, you know. So the link will be in the description and also pinned in the comments. With that said, again guys, just like the video, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.